There's a particular kind of Sunday afternoon where you find yourself with nothing planned, no one asking anything of you, just empty hours stretching ahead. For some people, this feels like freedom. For others, it feels like falling. Same circumstances, completely different experience. One person sits with a book and a cup of tea, content in the quiet. Another person scrolls frantically through their phone, texting anyone who might be available, turning on the television for background noise, doing anything to fill the void. The difference isn't about being alone. It's about whether you're at peace with yourself when no one else is there. Being alone is just a circumstance, a fact about your physical environment. You're in a room by yourself. You're eating dinner solo. You're taking a walk with no companion. It's neutral, neither good nor bad. Being at peace is something entirely different. It's an internal state, a relationship you have with yourself, a sense of okayness that doesn't depend on external conditions. You can be alone and at peace, alone and miserable, surrounded by people and at peace, or surrounded by people and desperately lonely. The presence or absence of other people tells you almost nothing about what's happening inside. I think about the difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is chosen. It's deliberate time alone that feels restorative, even necessary. You retreat from the world not because you're running from something but because you need space to think, to create, to rest, to simply be without the constant negotiation that being with others requires. Isolation is imposed or desperate. It's unchosen aloneness that feels like exile. You're alone because no one wants to be with you, or because you've pushed everyone away, or because connection feels impossible. Same external situation, radically different internal experience. The writer May Sarton, who lived alone for much of her life, wrote beautifully about this distinction. She talked about loneliness as the poverty of self and solitude as the richness of self. When you're lonely, being alone magnifies every insecurity and inadequacy. The silence becomes oppressive. Your own company feels insufficient. You're acutely aware of what's missing, who's not there, the connection you crave but don't have. But when you're at peace with yourself, that same aloneness becomes expansive. The silence is spacious rather than empty. Your own company is enough because you've learned to be a good companion to yourself. What makes someone capable of being at peace when alone? It's not about being an introvert versus an extrovert, though that plays a role. It's about whether you've developed an internal life rich enough to sustain you when external stimulation isn't available. It's about whether you can sit with your own thoughts without becoming anxious or depressed. It's about whether you like yourself enough to enjoy your own company, or whether being alone means being stuck with someone you're trying to escape. Most of us are running from ourselves. We fill every moment with distraction, with noise, with other people, with screens and substances and endless activity. Not because we don't have time to be alone, but because we're afraid of what we'll find if we stop running. We're afraid of the thoughts that arise in silence, the feelings we've been pushing down, the questions we haven't answered about who we are and what we actually want. Being alone forces us to face ourselves, and for many people, that's the most terrifying encounter imaginable. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That was in the 1600s, long before smartphones and social media. Even then, people understood that we flee from ourselves, that we can't tolerate our own company, that we need constant external validation and distraction to avoid confronting our internal emptiness. The technology has changed, but the underlying issue hasn't. We're still running, just faster and with more tools to help us escape. Being at peace requires you to stop running. It requires you to turn toward yourself rather than away, to get curious about your inner world rather than afraid of it. It means developing what psychologists call self-intimacy, the same kind of knowing and accepting relationship with yourself that you might have with a close friend. You know your patterns, your triggers, your wounds, your strengths. You can sit with difficult emotions without needing to immediately fix or flee from them. You've made peace with your imperfections rather than being at war with them. I watched a friend go through this transformation after a breakup. She'd always been in relationships, moving from one to the next with barely any time between. Being single terrified her. For the first few months alone, she was miserable, constantly trying to fill her calendar, dating frantically, unable to spend an evening by herself without feeling desperate. But gradually, something shifted. She stopped treating being alone as a problem to solve and started treating it as an opportunity to discover who she was outside of a relationship. She took herself to dinner. She traveled alone. She sat with her feelings instead of medicating them with attention from others. And slowly, being alone transformed from something she endured to something she actually valued. This is the paradox: you can't truly be at peace with others until you're at peace alone. If you need other people to feel okay, if their presence is the only thing standing between you and despair, you're not really connecting with them. You're using them. You're making them responsible for your emotional regulation, your sense of worth, your happiness. That's an impossible burden to place on anyone, and it creates relationships built on dependency rather than genuine connection. The people who seem most content in relationships are often the ones who are equally content alone. They're with their partner because they want to be, not because they need to be. They can enjoy connection without clinging to it, can appreciate intimacy without demanding it meet all their needs. They've done the hard work of learning to be good company for themselves, so they're not constantly outsourcing their well-being to someone else. There's also the question of what you do with the time when you're alone. Are you present with yourself, or are you constantly reaching for distraction? Being physically alone while scrolling through social media, watching television, playing games, talking on the phone, you're not really alone. You're still seeking external input, still avoiding genuine solitude. Real aloneness, the kind that can lead to peace, requires periods of actual silence and stillness, time when you're just with yourself and whatever arises. The meditation teacher Pema Chodron talks about making friends with yourself, and I love that phrase because it captures something essential. Most of us treat ourselves like an enemy or at best a stranger. We're harsh and critical. We don't trust ourselves. We don't enjoy our own company. Would you want to spend time with someone who spoke to you the way you speak to yourself? Who judged you as harshly? Who focused on your flaws as relentlessly? Probably not. So why would being alone with that voice be anything but miserable? Making friends with yourself means developing kindness toward your own experience, curiosity about your own inner world, patience with your own process. It means treating yourself with the same compassion you'd offer someone you care about. When you can do this, being alone stops being something to fear or fix. It becomes neutral at worst, nourishing at best. I've noticed that people who are at peace alone often have rich internal worlds. They think deeply. They imagine vividly. They create things. They have interests that don't require other people. They can get lost in a book or a project or a walk in nature. Their minds are interesting places to be, so being alone with their thoughts isn't torture. Meanwhile, people who dread being alone often have underdeveloped interior lives. They don't know what to think about. They don't have practices or hobbies that engage them. Their sense of self is so dependent on external reflection that without it, they feel like they barely exist. This doesn't mean you should want to be alone all the time. Humans are social creatures. We need connection, community, intimacy. But needing connection is different from being incapable of being without it. One is healthy interdependence. The other is desperate dependency. The goal isn't to become so self-sufficient that you don't need anyone. It's to become solid enough in yourself that you can be with others from a place of choice rather than fear. There's a particular sweetness to time alone when you're at peace with it. You can move through your day at your own rhythm without negotiating or compromising. You can eat what you want when you want. You can be silent for hours or talk to yourself out loud. You can follow your curiosity wherever it leads without explaining or justifying. You can be fully yourself without performance or pretense. This isn't selfishness. It's self-possession, the ability to inhabit your own life fully rather than constantly adjusting yourself to accommodate others. The writer Toni Morrison said something that stayed with me: you want to fly, you got to give up the shit that weighs you down. One of the things that weighs us down is the belief that we're not enough on our own, that we need constant external validation and companionship to have value. Learning to be at peace alone is like cutting that weight loose. You stop needing everyone else to make you feel real. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth. You discover that you're sufficient, not in the sense that you don't need anyone, but in the sense that you're not desperately incomplete without them. This is especially important in a culture that pathologizes aloneness. We treat people who enjoy time alone with suspicion. We assume something's wrong with them, that they're antisocial or damaged or sad. We pity people who eat alone at restaurants or go to movies by themselves. We act like being coupled or constantly surrounded by friends is the only healthy way to exist. But some of the most creative, fulfilled, psychologically healthy people throughout history have valued solitude. They understood that time alone isn't wasted. It's necessary. It's where you process experience, integrate learning, restore yourself, connect with something deeper than the constant noise of social interaction. The difference between being alone and being at peace is the difference between absence and presence. When you're just alone without peace, you're absent from yourself, distracted, uncomfortable, wishing you were anywhere but here with yourself. When you're alone and at peace, you're present, grounded, comfortable in your own skin. You're not waiting for life to begin when someone else shows up. You're living it now, fully, in whatever form it's taking. This doesn't happen automatically. It's a practice, a skill you develop over time. You start with short periods alone and gradually extend them. You notice when you reach for distraction and choose to sit with discomfort instead. You observe the thoughts and feelings that arise without immediately believing or acting on them. You develop interests and practices that engage you. You work on the relationship with yourself the same way you'd work on a relationship with anyone else, with attention, honesty, patience, and care. And here's what's beautiful: when you're at peace with yourself, everything changes. Relationships become richer because you're not clinging to them desperately. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're not doing it to prove your worth to yourself. Life becomes more spacious because you're not constantly running from the one person you can never escape, you. You discover that the peace you were seeking in achievement, in relationships, in external validation, it was always available right here, in learning to be present with yourself. So the real question isn't whether you're alone. It's whether you're at home with yourself when you are. Can you sit in silence without reaching for your phone? Can you spend an evening by yourself without feeling like you're missing out? Can you enjoy your own company the way you'd enjoy a good friend's? If not, that's where the work is. Not in finding more people to be around, but in becoming someone you actually want to be around. Someone you trust. Someone you like. Someone whose presence is enough, even when it's the only presence in the room. That's peace. Not the absence of loneliness or struggle or difficult feelings, but the capacity to be with yourself through all of it without needing to escape. It's one of the most important relationships you'll ever develop, and it's available to you right now. You don't need anyone's permission or participation. You just need to stop running and finally come home to yourself.